Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, the white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well, and ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing in the head. What's this they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with women's rights or Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then that little man in black over there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanasha LeRae. I'm the program director at Faith and Prejudice, and I'm so excited to bring someone to you who is so dear to my heart, one of my favorites, one of my heroes. Her name is Marilyn Luper Hildreth. Her mother is Clara Luper, who was who I consider one of the mothers of the civil rights movement. And she's here to just chat with us about her process, her experience. She was a civil rights activist and is still a civil rights activist to this day. And we just want to welcome you, Marilyn. We're so grateful that you are with us today. And just before we get started, I would love for you, because most people who do know you or who will look you up will see you as a very active woman in the community, someone who is very vocal, very vibrant, and very about the progress of African Americans and self-determination. But how would you introduce yourself to everyone, just from who Marilyn is as a human being and how Clara Luper raised you?
Now, that's a good question. As you know, I don't like talking about myself. I like to be a part of and not just, you know how I am. But if I had to describe myself, I would say that I'm a person that believed in right and justice and equality. And I want to treat people like I wanted to be treated. And I believe in God. That's it.
You keep it real simple. Equality, freedom, the golden rule, and your faith. That's really beautiful. Now, your mother, she goodness, she was an amazing woman with such grit, with passion, with vision, and even the Board of Education. For those that don't know Clara Luper, this woman was a vivacious woman in Oklahoma City who brought so much change. She was known for this particular moment in 1958, Cat's Drugstore, leading a sit-in. And you were actually pretty instrumental in sort of provoking that moment to happen. Can you tell us what went down in 1958 and what was your involvement with it?
As you know, my mother was a school teacher at Dungey High School, which is in the country. Green Pastures, one of the poorest school districts in Oklahoma. She wrote a play entitled Brother President, the story of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama. In the audience that night when we performed the play was Roy Wilkins, the executive director, youth director of the NAACP. And he wanted us to come to the National NAACP convention and present the play, but he only wanted to take one student, and that was the star of the show. But you know my mom. Mom said, if I'm gonna take one, I'm gonna take them all. And of course, as usual, we didn't have any money. We just had a lot of will and determination. So the patrons and parents got together and raised money selling hot dogs and chicken dinners and fish dinners and pickles and blow pops in order to get us to New York City. Now, what's so unique about this? You have to understand that most of us never had the opportunity to leave Oklahoma. And a lot of the students never had the opportunity to leave Spencer. I think that when she was putting together this program, she said, this is my teaching experience. So she plotted out a plan to get us to New York City. And we went the northern route. And for the first time in our lives, we had an opportunity to go into a restaurant, to sit down and drink a Coke or eat a hamburger without seeing the signs colored only, colored in the back of the restaurant. No, you cannot eat here because of the fact you're colored. For the first time in our lives, we could drink a Coke. And we enjoyed it. It's something about that. Harriet Tubman said a little bit of freedom is a dangerous thing. And for the first time in our lives, we kind of understood where she was coming from. But we went to New York City and put on that play and gave it everything that we had. And we did good. But on the way back, we had to come back to the South, through the hatred, the bigotry, the discrimination and segregation. And we came back and realized that it was only a dream that we were in. Because back again, it was colored to the back. No, you cannot come in here and eat. No, you cannot drink out of the water fountain or use the bathroom. You had to eat out of the brown paper sack. So when we got back to Oklahoma City, we negotiated with the Restaurant Owners Association and said, okay, we give you all of our money when we go downtown. We buy your clothes. And you know, during that time, I don't know, I know you're too young to remember this, but my grandmother used to have to take a string and measure our feet so she could go and buy our shoes because of the fact we could not go in a department store and try on shoes. And don't let us try to get a hat. They had to take a string and measure around our head to determine the size of the hat we would wear. So segregation and bigotry was alive and well in Oklahoma. And during this time, Oklahoma had more segregated laws than any other state in the union. And the young people decided, we don't like this. Why should we have to suffer these and riding on the back of the bus and being treated like nothing? So we continued to have the NACP meetings and decide what we were going to do. And my mother was the advisor. And I made a motion that we would go downtown and we sit down at Cat's drugstore until they served us. And little did I know, it was going to be a while, but we sat there. And then all at once, the walls of segregation start tumbling down. The walls, the invisible walls, the visible walls. It was like an army. We were trained in nonviolence of Gandhi, Martin Luther King. We were trained how to love our neighbors as ourselves. We were trained to turn the other cheek. So for 6 years, we demonstrated here in Oklahoma City, boycotted downtown Oklahoma City, and changed the course of history. And I'm so glad we sat down, because if we hadn't sat down here, a lot of kids would not have stood up across this country.
Yes, I definitely agree with you there. I know my experience in Oklahoma City, I felt the residue of racism, but I didn't feel the grit and the pain of it because of the work that you all did on a massive, massive scale. Can you take us back to little Marilyn? Little Marilyn, who I mean, I know you had to be feisty. I know you had to be spunky. I know you had to be strong, because Claire Luper, she did not raise weak children. And she raised you to be articulate, to always have something to say, to keep that head up, say your name with strength. But there was this other side of things that had to get you ready for that gruesome process. And what did that actually look like to prepare to go in and sit down in the diner, and all of the things that you all experienced, from the violence at the diner and the mistreatment and even beyond? How did you even prepare for that?
It was not overnight. Mom used to say, if you're a weakling, go buy you some tough skin at the hardware store, because you're going to need it to survive. And she was not kidding. We needed to have tough skin because people were mean and cruel. They would spit on us, kick us, and the guy even threw a chimpanzee on me. How did we prepare for it? That's a hard question, because during that time, the Black community was not really happy with us going down, messing up the status quo. The white community was not happy with us because we were interfering with their economic status. And it was a mental strain, not being liked on both areas. And they would, Black and whites, and that's why I tell young people all the time, we have to be careful in dealing with this thing called freedom, because a lot of times people that smile in your face are not always your friends in this fight for freedom. And we had to memorize a lot of Gandhi's theories. We did not go downtown protesting, just going. We had to be trained every time we would go down there. And that's why you find most of Clara Luper's kids that are very knowledgeable in history and why they set in, because we were trained on a daily basis. And of course, she took some of that tradition on further, because as you know, if you could not, or if you said, during that time, you had to sit down because she said you were not ready to talk. And I get so tickled because a lot of the sports people say, I can tell they were not in Clara Luper's class. But how did I prepare? It was hard because people laughed at us. I walked into a classroom one day after going to jail, and after our home was uh, a a firebomb was thrown in there, and the teacher said, who happened to be black, I'm sorry, here comes City and Squatty and Lay and Luper, and everybody laughed. But I often ask my mom where she got her strength from, because she had a strength that I can't explain. And I just, all the years that God gave me, my mom, I often ask the same question. Because when she was a child, her brother was taken to the hospital and denied service because his skin was black. She was from a place called Hoffman, Oklahoma, where they did not have a complete textbook. They had the used textbook that the white students had used. And they would read a story and half the pages would be gone. So they would create their own story. My grandmother moved to the servant quarters of Oklahoma City in Nichols Hills so that my mother and my aunts could go to college. And I would often ask her, where do you get your fight from? She's just like the die-hard battery. Just keep on moving and keep on clicking. And you know, I never will forget of all the things that my mother taught me, and why I think that we can keep on walking, keep on talking, and keep on fighting. Like during the election day down here, we called over 5,000 people to get out to vote. Why can we do that? Because she taught us this: to believe in the sun when the sun didn't shine, to believe in the rain when the rain didn't fall, and to believe in a God that I've never seen. That's how we were able to make it.
Wow. That's rich, and I'm hearing really a legacy too of women who sacrificed, that your mother would be able to be who she is, that you would be able to be who you are. And it's powerful. It kind of gives us a picture of how we need to take the baton and continue this work today. I want to hear a little bit more about your mother, and maybe something from the angle of one of your most cherished moments of her, because oftentimes people see this person out here, but what was the impact that she had on your life, and how you were able to see her in leadership and see her shining? Maybe even tell us a story of one of those most prized moments.
My life is so different. I had an opportunity to meet from Charleston Heston, Dr. West, people that most people just read about, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King. Just I've had opportunities that a lot of people would never have. And she made sure that we were, not only me, but the young people that were around her had the same opportunity. Because not only was she my mother, but she felt like she was the mother of so many other kids, and she treated them that way. I did not realize how really fortunate we were, because my mother took young people to the NAACP National Convention for over 50 years. She took a busload of kids. And I wonder why she died so poor, but she couldn't have no money because she spent money on kids. That's where her investment was. And she said to me, you always invest in young people, because you cannot look at a child and determine what that child can be. They might have a cure for cancer. They might be the next president. And don't look over, step over them, or walk over them. help them develop to their fullest. I think one of her greatest contributions was the fact that Black students and white students considered her diamonds. And one day when she was sick, they set up a telephone call where 400 students got on to talk to her. Now, how you gonna talk to that many people? But they figured it out, and she just loved it. But she was dedicated to a better day. And I get so tickled when people say Martin Luther King had a dream. Martin Luther King was not one of the first ones in our community to have dreams. Our forefathers had dreams, because otherwise, how could they say, I got shoes and you got shoes, all God's children got shoes, and never had a shoe on their foot? But they dreamed of a better day. And my mom used to tell the students down in Hoffman when she was in school that her father was a pilot. They would say, Clarice Shepard, you know your father's not a pilot. She said, yes, my father is a pilot. He piles bricks over here and bricks over there. But she always dreamed of being able to help young people and give them that drive and motivation to see a better day. And she wanted them to see opportunities. And she would say, I want you to go places that I have never been. And I want you to dream dreams that I never had.
That's beautiful. I myself have been a recipient of that kind of dreaming. Mama Luper was so many things. She was, yes, a community organizer. She was a motivational speaker. I mean, she would preach you happy and you would get up and go do something after she got done speaking. she was also the founder of the Freedom Center, as well as the founder of the Miss Black Oklahoma pageant. I ended up being able to come through that pageant system and got to serve as Miss Black Oklahoma in 2007 and got to be a Claire Luper Scholar at Oklahoma City University. And this woman, she just had her hand in everything as it pertains to raising up the next generation. She didn't let her dream die with her. She made sure she placed it in so many people. And that was so phenomenal, though, also as a woman. You know, it's Women's History Month, and I want to dig into this a little bit. What was it like at that time as well to be serving and leading and bringing change as a woman for Mama Luper and even as a woman for yourself?
Women throughout history have always been items of change. As you look back through anything that happened in history, there was a woman there. Women are filled with fight and determination. We have a spirit in us that makes us go on in spite. We're one of the few people that when there was not food, we were able to take leftovers from the pig and make chitlins. So you know we can do anything. And it's been a struggle throughout the history of our community. Even in the church, women have been the key to the development of our religious system. In the school system, the women have played an active role in changing the lives of young people. In the community, just look around. There are women have been busy. I often wonder, I said, well, if you took away all the women, what would this society be? And you had to say nothing. We would be nowhere. But I know that it's some young people coming up today that we still have to put our hands to the plow and help them go down the field of life. There's no easy way. And during the Black Lives Matter movement, I had people to call me here in Oklahoma City, said, well, they're not trained like we were trained. I said, no, but they're our kids and we have to support them. They're people that responded like we responded, but in a different way. So if they don't have the training they need, we need to get in there and train them. But we're not going to talk about them. What is the women's role? It's one that it has always been. That's to do the best we can with what we have. And when we run out of energy, we got to reach down and get some more, because this race is not won.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because you have a very unique perspective, living at a time where many of us, we tell the stories of that day because we've been to the museums or we've read the books or we've heard the stories from you all. But you, knowing a lot of the progress, you also know and have a very unique perspective about how much progress still needs to be made. What do you feel are some of the things that we still need to see change and development and progress in today? And what would you say to the people still fighting?
Fight on, because this war is not won. What would I say? But let me tell you something. I have a cure to all this stuff. I have a cure, and nobody will pay attention to it. I say to America, you go to bed tonight, and someone will take your DNA. And when they take your DNA tonight, and tomorrow when you wake up, according to the Constitution and the Supreme Court, if you have a drop of black blood in you, you're black. Now, wouldn't it be something if America woke up and found out they were black? Now, wouldn't it? Only thing you need is a drop. That's my cue for it. I said, give everybody a DNA test and let's get this segregation discrimination done for life. But being as though we're not going to do that, I think that Trump, and forgive me for calling his name, but an ace is an ace and a spade is a spade, brought out in people that were supporting him more hatred and bitterness than I've seen in decades. Because when I was down there during Martin Luther King's funeral, and when we had voters registration in the South, I didn't see such hatred then. But now people have taken off their Ku Klux Klan masks. They don't mind being white nationalists. They're not ashamed of it. And they think that they can do anything that they want to us and against us. But that's not so, because time we record, and you can not keep your foot on someone's neck all the time. And they're gonna remove their foot.
Thank you for that. There's definitely a stirring that we're in right now. You can feel the climate has changed in the nation. We felt it really, really strongly after the George Floyd situation, and it hasn't simmered down. It's actually a challenge right now as I'm even mentoring individuals and walking with organizations through a lot of this process. Many people are struggling to even hang on to faith in this time. And just as a last question, Marilyn, because this is what was instrumental for the change that you all brought. What would you say to the individual that is trying to reconcile, faith with this prejudice, faith with this racism, and faith with the fight to see it end?
To see it end?
Yeah, what would you say to the individual who is struggling with keeping their faith in the midst of all of this struggle? Because you all did such an incredible job with that.
I would just say to them, hold on, help is on its way. Because God never puts us in a position that we can't get out of. He gives us the strength to fight and the determination to fight when there's nothing you think to fight for. But if you can just put a knot in that rope and keep pulling. Because look at our ancestors. Look what they came through. They couldn't even speak the language, but they were able to communicate through the plantations by drums. We have a strong heritage. We have a fighting spirit. We have to keep that. We can't afford to let no one turn us around. We've come too far. It's up to you and your generation to make the change. You did not have to go through what we did because of the fact your grandmother and the people in your family, your grandfather worked at Fifth Street and gave us a place to meet and a safe haven for the freedom fighters. But you have a responsibility to pass that on, not only to your kids, but to your nieces and nephews and to the young people that you talk to in the community. Because until we get people to realize if you're black, you're black. You born black, you're gonna have to live black, and you're gonna die black. So deal with it.
Deal with it and deal something with it, because we all have to steward the stories we've been given, and we all have to give an account for what we did with what God gave us. And Marilyn, you've done some incredible things with what God has given you. I just want to thank you for the sacrifice. Thank you for all the time spent. Thank you for taking all the headaches and all the hits. It's because of people like you that we can stand in the progress today and push for even more progress. So bless you. So glad that you were spending time with us today. Our Faith and Prejudice community is better for having you.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you too.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Nona Jones, and I'm the founder of Faith and Prejudice. This month, we all know that the month of March is a national observance of Women's History Month. And given our mission here at Faith and Prejudice being to equip the local church to confront and dismantle systemic racism in America, we want to try to use this time, use this month to explore the intersections of race as well as gender and faith. Today, I am so excited. I'm deeply honored to have someone joining me for this conversation who I have long admired, Bishop Vashti Murphy McKenzie. She serves as the 117th elected and consecrated bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and her historic election in the year 2000, which happens to be the year that I graduated from high school and watched it on television. It represents the first time in the 200-year history of the AME Church that a woman obtained the level of Episcopal office. And her first just continue from there. You have to visit her website to get the full story. But today, she proudly serves as the bishop of the 10th Episcopal District, where she provides leadership to all of the AME churches across the entire state of Texas. So Bishop McKenzie, truly, I'm so honored to have you. I mean, you made history in so many ways, but I think sometimes we focus on the history, we focus on the resume, and I actually wanted to take a moment to ask you if you could introduce yourself to us beyond the credentials, like before the credentials. Tell us about your family and your childhood, and what even led you into ministry as a full-time vocation.
Well, thank you for inviting me to share, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your Faith and Prejudice movement. I'm not going to say a program, but movement with the congregations that listen in. And for me, of course, I grew up Vashti Murphy Smith. That was my parents' name. I grew up in a two-parent household. I grew up in what I describe as Black spaces. I walked 2 blocks to my elementary school, Robert Brown Elliott School number 104, Colored School number 9. And I, one of 2 children, my brother, football, Army guy, who went on to a fabulous career before he transitioned and God took him home. Neither one of my parents are alive right now. I live next door to my piano teacher, Mrs. Swan, who taught me how to play piano. I absolutely love music, all genres of music, from light classical to gospel. to R&B and others. I haven't really embraced hip hop yet, but I'm a little bit closer than what I was. It took me a moment to understand the creative genius of hip hop, that when you take everything from people and all they have is a voice, and how they put that voice together is marvelous, is marvelous. And so I grew up having a Black church experience. I could live in a library all day long. My grandfather had a fabulous library. And when I went to visit my grandparents, I would spend most of the time in the library, going from shelf to shelf and book to book. When people ask me to describe myself, I say that I'm a creative. I love the creative process. I love when elements come together and what you didn't expect now becomes something wonderful and brand new and real. I am a transformer, and so I'm a change agent. I go into places, and my mission is to be about change. When other people are looking at the ground, I'm looking at the horizon. I'm looking for the next. And everybody's not designed or called to for the next. Some people are very good ground people. They are managers. They take care of everything, the day to day and what's there. But I'm looking to the next, to the hills from whence cometh our help. I'm looking for the next. And so I'm Ida and Ed's little girl from the west side of Baltimore, go west side, who grew up in a very wonderful atmosphere where your gifts were allowed to bloom. My mother was a marketing and brand guru. She was a pioneer in that area, and her four sisters were also pioneers in journalism. They were editors before women were editors. They were writers. They were columnists, publishers. And so I grew up in this atmosphere where your color was not held against you. Your color was your positive and not your negative. And your gift was the announcement to the family and to people around you that you now must exercise this gift. And so, it's a wonderful atmosphere to grow up before you go out into the real world, but that is not the case. And so when you ask me about the call to ministry, what made you decide to go into ministry? It wasn't my idea. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't on my plate. It wasn't in my view. It was never spoken about. This was God's idea. And it took me a good little while before God and I got on the same page about this, because I had other things in mind. Remember, I grew up in a literate community where your expression is either in print or in broadcasting. Of course, my cousins went on to do other kinds of things, but I was in broadcasting, and that's where I was going. I went from on-air personality to program director to operations manager to general manager to corporate vice president of Christian radio stations. And that's where I was going. I was going to ownership, I'm going to ownership to own my own facility. Kathy Hughes was my first boss in broadcasting. I'm following her. And God taps you on the shoulder and says, I have other plans for you. And you have to say, okay, God, look here, I'm on a trajectory. And that's not and then God makes it clear that trajectory is a preparation for where I want you to go. And so I said yes to God. And so here I am talking to you.
Wow, that's incredible. I want to talk a little bit more about your educational upbringing, because I read somewhere that you attended, I think it was an all girls school. You ended up, I think you were like one of a handful of Black students, and you ended up graduating from high school. It was only like 10 years after Brown versus Board of Education. So this wasn't like America was suddenly post-racial. I think there was definitely a lot of racial strife. I'd love for you to talk about how racism or race in general may have shaped your life and your experience growing up.
Ooh, Nona. Growing up in the west side of Baltimore, as I said, I grew up in Black spaces, and integration came when I was in the 5th grade. And all of a sudden, out of my wonderful cocoon of family and church and groups and organizations and just growing up, just being a kid, I was bussed across town to a new culture that I was not familiar with, and people who were not familiar with me. I was there not because I was invited or not because people thought I belonged there. I was there because the law said so. And so instead of being embraced, you're tolerated. You're tolerated. Okay, so we're just going to have to put up with them. And so here they are. And so I left a school where I had teachers who invested in my education and who invested in my success. I felt supported. And so when I was on the right track, there were people in my balcony that said, go, 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 go. And when I made the left turn, they were there to say, no, come back this way, come this way. Now, all of a sudden, I'm immersed where people cannot pronounce my name. You're Vashti, you Vashti. We can't pronounce that. Why didn't your mother name you Mary or Susan? My mother didn't name me Mary or Susie, okay? My name is Vashti. Well, we can't pronounce your name, so we're going to call you Ty. And so you go to school, hi, Ty, hi, Ty, hi, Ty, hi, Ty. You go like, that is not my name. And I hated it. I mean, I absolutely hated it. And so when people don't even take the time to learn your name, they don't want to take the time to know you, to know you. So now I'm in classroom after classroom where teachers tolerate you. They don't expect you to be successful. They are not investing in your success or in your future. So remember I said I live next door to my piano teacher. So I played the piano. And so, and then I went to Peabody and I played piano at Peabody. So now I'm in my sixth grade, and I go, they have an orchestra, they have a band. Well, my school, colored school number 9 didn't have a band, didn't have an orchestra, but school number 18 did. And so you go into the room and I said, oh, I want to be a part of the band. This is great. Remember, I love music, right? Well, we have to give you a musicianship test to see if you have any musical capabilities. Okay, fine. We take the musicianship, we got in the 99 percentile. All right. And what instrument do you want to play? The piano. Well, we already have a pianist. And there's only one pianist. So you have to play something different. Why don't you play the flute? Well, if I wanted to be in the band, I wasn't going to play the piano. I had to learn how to play the flute. I never played the flute, didn't know what the flute was. I mean, the flute was a part, it was an instrument. And so now you're going to play the flute. Okay, we learned how to play the flute. Boom. So now we are part of the band. And so at every step, there's a struggle just to be who you are, just to be who you are. I love art. I do. I just love it. I love it. I love it. Well, how do you know about that? How do I not know about that? We talked about art. My grandfather had a Henry O. Tanner on his wall. How many Henry O. Tanners are there outside of the museum? And so, that was great discussions, when we were kids growing up. Do you know who drew that? No. Do you know who painted that? No. That's a Henry O. Tanner. Really? So this is your assignment. This is grandparents, right? This is your assignment. I want you to go down to the library. I want you to find the books on Henry O. Tanner. I want you to pull it out and I want you to read about who he is. And so later in the afternoon, you come up and you go like, wow, this is awesome. This is awesome. But now I'm in a place that is not encouraging me to explore to other genres and to look whatever. And you just walk every day, you're feeling that everybody's tolerating you and everyone is against you. Then this is where you begin to have to prove who you are every day. You have to prove you have a right to be there, not just because the law says so. And you have to be better than the next person in your grade just in order for the teacher to smile. Mm-hmm. And so that's a part what it's like. And so how does that translate into adulthood? I am a woman in non-traditional roles. There were not many program directors in Washington, D.C. when I was in radio. You had to prove you would belong there, that you were just as good as everybody else, and that you could do the job. So now I'm a preacher. I have to prove who I am. I have a right to be there. And you have to be better than the best in order for the teacher to smile. That hasn't changed. And my problem is that after all these years, we're still having these discussions, and we shouldn't have these discussions. After all these years, we're still in a position where you have to be better than the best, you have the right to be there, and you have to prove that you belong beyond the color of your skin.
You know, it's so unfortunate. What you just said is true. I find we're having the same conversations now that we've been having for centuries. Like, this is not new. This is not sudden. I think there are some people who are suddenly aware, but the conversations have been happening for so long. I'd love to get your take. Let's now talk about the preacher side, because I think this is where it's already complicated just to be a Black person in society. It's complicated to be a Black woman in society. But now you're talking about being a Black preacher woman in society, and that's its own ball of wax. So can you tell us about your call to preach? And I'm sure as you were heading down the path towards ordination, it probably wasn't smooth. I'm just guessing that people weren't like, thank you so much. Yes, we want you. What was that like? Yeah, give us a sense of what that journey was like.
What, it's similar to any journey where you are in a place where people don't expect you to be. And so all my life, I've been in places where people didn't expect me to be. I didn't, I wasn't expected to be at Peabody. I wasn't expected to be in art classes at the Baltimore Museum. I wasn't expected to be where I am, to be at School 18 or graduate from Eastern High School. I just wasn't expected to be there. So it's a similar feeling that you're in a place where people don't expect you to be, because people tend to assign you to places. So all of y'all going, when I was in 18, they said, we have a track team. Okay, but I don't run track. Okay, so this is where we expect you to be. Or we expect you to be over here. We expect you to be. And whenever you step outside of the perception of where people expect you to be, then there's that tension. The difference is, as a woman in ministry, is not only do we think this is what you ought to do, we say this is what God said. So it's not what we say. God said this. God said this. And so the God who called me doesn't have an issue of my gender, because he knew I was female when he called me. And if God wanted to be male, he would have fixed it before I got here. Right? And so for me, this has been a 40-year discussion. So I wrote the book, Not Without a Struggle, because I got tired of answering the question. So what do you say? And after a while, I said, God, is my whole ministry supposed to be defending my call? Is that what I'm supposed to do when I walk into the pulpit? Is that all I'm supposed to preach about? When I have Bible study, is this all I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to spend the rest of my life living out my faith relationship with you? And you called me to do this because I was going to do something else. Is this my role in ministry? And God and I had a great little conversation. And so the Lord reminded me, I called you as a preacher, not a woman preacher. I called you as a pastor, not a woman pastor. I called you as an Episcopal servant. Okay, not as a woman Episcopal servant. So when I walk into the pulpit, I walk in as the preacher that God called me to be. When I walk into teaching, I walk in as God called me to be. Not walking in as a woman preacher, a woman pastor, a woman this, a woman this, a woman that. Because the moment I walk in the room, you figure it out, I'm a female. The moment you see me. And so a part of the reason for me wanting to go to seminary is I wanted to study the original languages. So instead of people telling me what God said. I can go study it for myself. I can go look at it. I can go look into the original language and go into the ancient text and go back and understand, where it is, the historical, the moment, and this sociological moment and psychological moment and the biblical moment, all of that for me. But the Bible, Joel wrote what God said, and Peter preached it at Pentecost, that your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Yeah? We are all one in Christ Jesus. There's neither slave nor bond, free, male nor female. We are all one in Christ Jesus. So we can go back to the Old Testament, and Numbers 20:1 says that Mary was just as much prophet as her brother. Both prophets, different roles, different functionalities. Isaiah's wife was a prophet. Huldah was a prophet. We could go on and on and on. The 4 daughters of Philip prophesied. Aquila and Priscilla were pastors. They're women who started churches like Lydia. Then there's Junia, which Paul refers to as one of these apostles. But wait. Well, Junia is also a man's name. Right, okay. Prisca was called one of the fellow workers with Paul. And so you could either spend your whole ministry going back and forth, or you're going to do the work. You're going to do the work. And for me, it's doing the work. Everybody is not saved, and salvation is serious. And as I said, I love the creative process. So, the joy, a part of the joy for me is watching somebody come alive in Jesus Christ. Watching someone standing on the fringes, I'm a pew sitter, that's all. And we have people who come because of culturally, I like this atmosphere and miss the sacred holy altogether. And to watch the light come on. Yeah. And watch God start to work through them and watch them grow. And then the pew sitter becomes the ministry worker. I just love it. I just, that just like, ooh, look at what God is doing. Look what God is doing. And to walk into empty, dead spaces and say, come on, Jesus, life, right here, life needs to be life. And watching dead spaces come alive with life. Catch on fire, the fire of the Holy Spirit. And that fire goes beyond the walls of the sanctuary until all of a sudden the whole neighborhood, it's like the vision in Ezekiel where the stream flows from the altar and goes down and out of the door, and wherever the water went, there was transformation. So whatever was dead, you can see I'm getting excited. Whatever is dead becomes alive, and the fish became alive, and the trees became fertile, and fruit and leaves, and all of that's going on. And so to me, that is the excitement of ministry, to watch this happen. Dead people become alive, and dead places become alive again. And so, I'm a shepherd of shepherds now. So as I'm shepherd of shepherds, is the neighborhood around your church alive? Or are you the only live thing on the corner? Are you here because you don't have nothing else to do? Or are you here to do something? And so, there are experiences. Yeah, there were experiences where people just tolerate you. Well, maybe if we don't speak to her, she'll go away. Maybe if we ignore her, she'll go away. Maybe if we treat her not like a child of God. Maybe if we speak to her, call her out of her name. Maybe if we insult her, she'll go away. That's when you have to know it's a call of God. Because otherwise, you get frustrated, you get stressed out, and you turn around and walk away from what God has called you to do. So yes, there are experiences, in being invited to the church and to preach. It is obviously the women were a part of applying the pressure to invite you to preach, and you would go. And the pastor's obviously not extending any courtesies or hospitality, you arrive at the church at the appointed time, 20 minutes before the hour of worship or 30 minutes before the hour of worship, and nobody there. No welcoming committee, nobody like, oh, the pastor's in his office now. And so you can just wait out here in the hall, and you can put your robe on in the ladies' room. Maybe if we treat her badly, she'll go away. You didn't call me. God did. And so, well, you cannot preach from the pulpit. And so, of course, all your friends say, girl, you just need to walk up out of there. They're not going to. What? You're ordained. Are you kidding? Hands have been laid on you. You've gone through classes and all the kinds of things and whatever your reformation requires of you to be able to do this work. And they say, why did you stay and preach from the floor? Because God called me. And after I preached, He's going to have to explain what happened. You're going to have to explain what happened. So the Lord has blessed me to preach in all different kinds of places. I've been to churches of multiple denominations just to go and to serve. Just to go and to serve. Not defend, not define, but just go and serve.
Whew, you did about 4 sermons in that time. You did 4 sermons. I think you encouraged the hearts of so many women who have been questioning their call, not because they're unsure of what God has called them to, but because of the voices of people who have questioned their call. It's funny, Bishop McKenzie, anytime my team posts a clip of a sermon that I preached, there's always that one comment that comes through. It's usually 1 Timothy 2:12. But I suffer not a woman to teach, but to usurp authority over man, but to learn in silence. And there's always that statement. And what I've had to tell my team is I've said, listen, one naysayer does not stop what God has called us to do. And so I think you have encouraged so many people. And I want to ask you this, what is it that the church needs to do? I mean, looking ahead, you've persevered through so much. Looking ahead, what does the church need to do to play a leadership role in expressing the full counsel of God's word? Not the few scriptures, because I think you were so right in what you said, is the Bible is replete with stories of women's leadership and leadership in the church and in society. And then there's the few scriptures that you have to interpret within the replete side of the counsel, but that doesn't happen. What does the church need to do to lead the change we need to see for other women to be able to fully step into what God is calling them to do? What are your thoughts on that as we close?
Woo, well, just as, you take racism seriously, you need to take sexism seriously, because you cannot believe that the scriptures and ministry and the kingdom and all of that we do is only involved in male experiences and male images and male thoughts, and that women are a passive subject of the scriptures. Women are not passive subjects of the scripture. They add value and worth because of who they are. And so all too often, all women are blamed for what Jezebel did and who Jezebel was. That's all we hear, the Jezebel. All women are blamed for what happened with Eve without fully unpacking what happened. So wait a minute now. Adam made a mistake too, but all men are not blamed because of what Adam. But Eve had a pot pot too, but all women, So we can go on with that, but the church needs to heal, and before we go to heal the church, we have to be healed ourselves. Our fears, our phobias, and our prejudices require repentance and healing. And for us to come before the throne of God and ask the Lord to open us so I can see that whoever you are, black, brown, green, purple, stripes, polka dotted, that you are created in the image of God. And the Lord valued so much that he went to the cross for you. He didn't go to the cross for just white people or brown people or black people or yellow or red. He went for all humanity. Not one denomination owns the results of the resurrection, but Jesus died and rose for all of us, not some of us, no matter how repugnant that is to you. And so if it is repugnant, then God, help me to see the neighbor that you tell me to love my neighbor as you love myself. Help me to love like you love. For how can you say you love God whom you haven't seen and you hate me that you see me every day? So I'd rather tolerate you than to see that you are a creation of God and that you are so valuable. Jesus died on the cross for you. So first we need to be healed, and then we need to take that healing out to the broader community so that they too can be healed. You have to take an individual responsibility and a corporate responsibility. My individual responsibility is how I treat the people in the circle that I travel in most of all. That's my individual responsibility.
Thank you so much for your wisdom, and thank you for your perseverance, because there are so many women of all races, all denominations who can look to your example for hope and encouragement. And so I just pray that God will continue to enlarge your territory, and just continue to extend your reach into new generations. So thank you so much for joining us, and God bless you.